Hey, everybody. We are within hours, believe it or not, hours of the IHSA state playoff pairings. EDGYTIM here, along with, you know him, you love him. Now, I don't know if you love him. Maybe you love him. Someone out there, I'm sure, does, Matt, besides me. Matt Leng joining us. And yes, we are getting excited. We are approaching week 9. We survived week 8. It was not a fun week. It was kind of a wet week up here in the northern part. We got through it. Now we're geared up. We're looking forward to a busy week 9, an interesting week 9. Certainly a lot of interesting matchups across the state. And then, Matt, Saturday night, 8 o'clock, IHSA releases the playoff pairings. I will be on the air. I will be doing my radio show from 1340 WJOL in Joliet. Get the Odyssey app. Just download WJOL Joliet. And
Sure.
You can listen online. You can listen at WJOL.com. You can watch us live on YouTube. We'll be streaming and also live from the studio, and join us. And even this handsome fellow is going to join us on the show. So you got to be there.
I would say right now we look like we are dressed for week 8 that we just had. You know, I'm kind of like just got.
We're getting more winter-like. I got a little bit of
Fisher Buddy stuff on. You look like you just kind of got out of the running kids through the Smitty blaster or something.
Yeah, it was week 8 Friday was not fun. It was actually better where I was. Anyway, we won't get into too much of that, but it was better where I was than actually where I live. The area where I live got hit a lot harder with rain all night Friday, so I kind of lucked out a little bit there.
Sure.
But anyway, so we're back. Matt Leng joining us, and we are here the next, I don't know, knowing us, probably an hour, and we'll look back at week 8. We'll take a look at the AP rankings from 4A through 1A. Check out the 8-man rankings from NUIC football. We'll talk a little bit of preview in the playoffs and maybe a couple of storylines to keep track of this week. And then obviously we will go full guns blazing next week when we're talking IHSA playoffs. But Matt, it's a great time of the year. It seems like every week we're getting closer and closer and closer to the bad weather getting here. Getting there.
No, we got a good share of it on Friday night. I know on Saturday I enjoyed my first flannel fest in Champaign, Illinois, lumberjacking, and was hanging out with my son and listening to Illinois football pull off a big win over Maryland in College Park. And my juices are officially flowing. And I will just tell you this, that this cold weather, this rainy, this damp, this is what it's all about. We're ready for this. And just so all the listeners know, and if they care, like we'll do one 50-yard line report tonight. And then as we get into the playoffs, that's when we'll kind of go into the 4 quarters and overtime. Because I just think there's those stories. Yep. And there are a lot of stories developing, I think, but it takes a little while. You got to see how the field's projected and how everything goes. But it's exciting. It's Selection Saturday. It's what knuckleheads like you and I, live for because we enjoy it so much.
So I look forward to the show that obviously we'll do Saturday night, but I look forward even more to our podcast next week because we'll have our full brackets. We'll have 4A through 1A, and what the hell, we might as well do an 8-man bracket too.
Yeah.
And we'll tell you who we like. We'll give you our sleepers, who we think could upset where, and that's the fun when we get to hear how wrong Coach Matt Leng is.
And we will argue about Whoppers candy, Butterfingers, Polish sausage, fried chicken, grapes, strawberries, everything. We're gonna go after it.
See, I'll get passionate about the candy side, but all the other stuff, I'll eat anything. So it's all good. It's all good.
We're gonna get after it. I can't wait. So I'm gonna try to come up with some new interesting stuff this year.
Good, because the old stuff we're all sick of. So get to work.
Except for talking about candy, which you're very adamant. You're very passionate about candy.
Love it. Got bad teeth, everything to go with it. So absolutely love it. This time
the proof is in the pudding, right?
This time of year is the best. The wife literally brought home like 400 pieces of candy today for Halloween, and we're already hiding stuff around the house so we don't open it until Halloween. So there you go. Okay. All right, let's go into this. Matt, you know what? Let's start in 1A. The one thing I will tell you is that kind of expected this. There were some changes this week. AP's a little less predictable this week. There were some upsets, and man, I got to think the weather might have had something to do with a couple of these, but we'll go through it and we'll see what you think. So again, we're going to go through the Week 9 Associated Press Top 10 poll that just came out earlier today. No surprise at the top, Lena Winslow, number 1, have been the number 1 team since the preseason. Camp Point Central at 2. Althoff continue to working their way up. They're up to number 3. Greenfield Northwest at 4. Stark County at 5. Morrison at 6. Hope Academy at 7. Forreston, Matt, 3 last week down to 8. And we'll get into why Forreston made that drop. Number 9 is Kewanee, Anawan Weathersfield. They are up from 10. New team in the poll this week, Cesar Valier defeated Johnston City 30-28. So they are in at number 10. Out this week of the poll, Sterling Newman Central Catholic. They were in last week at number 7. They lost pretty convincingly to Kewanee 34-8. So Sterling Newman out this week. Cesar Valier in this week. And Forreston with the drop, Matt. Forreston with a 6-0 loss to Dupec, Matt. 6-0. Yeah. Got to think weather might have been a little bit of a factor in that one.
Yeah, and I think as the show goes on and we start talking a little bit later, I'll kind of talk about the NUIC and maybe a sleeper team that could pop into that playoff projection, and I'll save that for later. But we have talked about Dupec. We've talked about how they are a dynamic team with the Hoffman kid at quarterback and his dad as the coach, but they also can kind of go toe to toe. Now I'm not saying they're going to get points for moral victories of staying within 20 points of Lena Winslow, but to win a dogfight and on probably a goat ranch type of atmosphere, field condition against Forreston, tip your hat off to Dupec. And Forreston, I think, is going to be all right, but maybe their ego is bruised a little bit.
Might be a wake-up call a little bit, maybe. Never know.
Yeah.
You hope. Yeah. If you're Forreston, hopefully kind of gets you to refocus a little bit. And again, we know what this week is. This is the big one this week. Maybe not quite as big as we thought a week ago.
Yeah.
But still, anytime Forreston and Lena Winslow together, it's a big deal.
I think not the Forreston you could go 1A through 4A all the way up to 8A and 8-man, and you could analyze some of these teams. You're dealing with psyches of kids. Forreston gets by beating a very competitive Gibson City team that came back this week and won 8-6 over Leroy at Gibson City. So now Forreston, they drop one, so they might be kind of thinking, oh my gosh, now we're going against the New York Yankees this Friday night, in Lena, and it's going to be a challenge for them. And they know what that's all about. They know what the NUIC is all about. This prepares them for that. And, you better put your chin strap and go after it, because I can tell you right now, Coach Aarons will have his team ready to rock and roll, and they'll have that engine humming underneath the hood.
And again, not to be the bummer or the grim reaper of the podcast, but, the one bummer of this week is both teams know they're going to see each other in 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
Yeah. Well,
so,
it's the one thing we don't like to talk about, but we got to talk about because it's the inevitable, and you can't delay or get rid of the inevitable. And the inevitable is the same teams are seeing the same people in certain classes.
Yep. Again,
so we got to just kind of, adjust and kind of accept that.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting, I think, in 1A. You talk about 1A. It'll be interesting to see if Morrison maybe is a team that you could watch out for. Hope Academy, like you said, with that athleticism. It'd be really interesting to see where Kewanee Weathersfield goes. Are they going to go north or are they going to go south? One year they were north, and they took on Lena in the semifinals. So we'll see what's going to happen. I think there's some good teams there. Stark County. It'd be really interesting to see.
Also wanted to mention others receiving votes in 1A this week. Aurora Christian, Fulton, Gibson City, Melvin Sibley, Leroy, Sterling Newman, Central Catholic. So we got a lot of the usual suspects there still hanging around the bottom of the top 10 poll in Class 1A. Moving on, we'll go to Class 2A. Again, these are the Associated Press top 10 poll in Week 9. No big shocker here either. Maroa, number 1. Tri-Valley at 2, Bloomington Central Catholic at 3, Seneca at 4, Shelbyville at 5, Rock Ridge at 6, Athens at 7, ALAH at 8. 9 is Moments. They are new into the poll this week, and also new into the poll this week, tied at 9. Farmington. So Moments is in, Farmington is in. So again, going through 2A, out is Knoxville. Knoxville was in at number 5 last week, Matt. Lost 42-0 to Fulton. Wow, Fulton taking it to them. So again, they knocked Knoxville out of the AP poll this week. Also out number 10, previously number 10, Bismarck Henning. They ended up losing as well, so they got knocked out. But in this week, as we mentioned, Moments beat Wasika 36-7, so they are in. They are in tied at 9 along with Farmington. Farmington beat Lewistown 56-6 to get in, and then we also mentioned ALAH. They also beat Arcola 32-10. So definitely some new faces here in 2A, Matt.
Yeah, we talked last week about Arthur Lovington. That was kind of the showcase game of the week down here in terms of them taking on Arcola. By the time they played that second half, it was a downpour. It was a close game at halftime. Arthur Lovington pulled it out in the second half. Knoxville, it's kind of interesting how they got, Ryan Hubbard, a good friend of mine, runs a wing tee, runs a wishbone. Maybe just kind of, took on a formidable opponent in Fulton, and that kind of happened there. So that's kind of interesting to see how that happened. I think 2A is just very solid. I mean, you top to bottom, I think it's just extremely tough. And you got everybody. I think the way the projections going now, Athens and BCC are both going to be in 2A.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting.
I've seen BCC, maybe 3A could very well be on that cut line. So
it's just going to be really interesting to see how this all kind of unfolds, because I think the top dog in 2A is Maroa. But we'll see. They're going to have an interesting game here this Friday night against Athens. So, all these teams are good. I just think 2A is just really, really, really interesting. When we have yet probably, and I don't know if this is just a Freudian slip on my part, we have really not talked about Josh Roop and Tri-Valley. They are still, the team that usually comes out of there is in the quarterfinals and semifinals every year, and we have not really talked about them. So, I apologize to all my friends in Tri-Valley, and I'm sure
take them for granted.
We do, and I'm sure in the playoffs we'll start talking about them. That HOIC is kind of split into 2 divisions now, and Tri-Valley is went toe to toe in heavyweight fights with Eureka, El Paso, all these teams, and they've stood that test.
Yep. Again, I want to mention teams also receiving votes in the AP Class 2A Top 10 poll. Johnson City, Breeze Mater Dei, Westville, Knoxville, Bismarck Henning, and White County, Carmine White County. So again, those schools also hanging out in the very bottom of the 2A poll in Class 3A. Again, these are the Week 9 Associated Press Top 10 in Class 3A. Not a whole lot of change here. Byron at 1, Princeton 2, Wilmington 3. Again, Wilmington dancing that dance between 2A and 3A as well. Roxana at 4, DuQuoin at 5, Greenville at 6, Dupec at 7, St. Joe Ogden at 8, Montini at 9, and Williamsville at 10. The only real change, Matt, and again, I'll mention the others to receive votes. Mount Carmel receives votes, and the others, including Olympia, as well as Sullivan, Tolono Unity, and Chicago Phillips. One diehard voter keeps voting Chicago Phillips at the bottom of the poll. Montini drops a little bit. They dropped from 6-9 this week. A 24-7 loss to Class 7A. I think Brother Rice is 7A. So again, drop but don't drop out. And obviously playing a much larger opponent, but not a whole ton of change here in 3A.
No, tip my hat off to my friends at Olympia. Eric Lyons has the team playing real well. Chase Letweiler is, fully effective at the outside linebacker spot, and Olson's the running back, and they just got a real good team. They really took it to Auburn. It's going to be interesting. You talked about Wilmington there, and you kind of slipped that in, man. I tell you what, if they're in 3A, watch out. But if they're in 2A, I think that is a train wreck collision course ready to happen. Yeah. I would love to see them take on Maroa Forsyth, if they were on opposite sides of the bracket, just because their schedule has tested them for these playoffs that are coming up here in Week 10. So that'll be really interesting. There's some interesting things going down in the South. I'm going to talk about that later on the 50-yard line report. And, like I said, I think in 3A, I think top to bottom, I think there's some really good teams, and I'm going to talk about the DeCoins and the Murphyborough and the Roxana 8-0, and they're getting ready to, complete a perfect season, regular season 9-0 here. And so a lot of good teams, St. Joe, all these teams, 3A is going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, making our way over to Class 4A. Again, these are the Associated Press Class 4A top 10 poll for this week. Definitely a little bit of change here. Rochester still at number 1, Morris at 2. Again, Morris, another team being mentioned as a bubble team between 4A and 5A. So definitely got to watch that. Murphysboro at 3, IC Catholic at 4, Richmond Burton at 5, Boylan at 6. 7 is Wheaton Academy. Number 8 is St. Lawrence, down from 6. Dixon at 9. Kewanee in this week at number 10. Again, they get in. Out this week is Mount Zion. Mount Zion, unfortunately, last week lost to Effingham 21-14. That knocks Mount Zion out of the poll this week. In steps Kewanee in at number 10. And we mentioned St. Lawrence dropped from 6 to 8. St. Lawrence with a 20-9 loss, again, to a bigger St. Rita team. So others receiving votes in 4A include Breeze Central, Rochelle, Coal City, Mount Zion, Geneseo, and Charleston.
Yeah, and I would just say, 4A is just really, really tough also. And, you look at some of these teams that we're talking about, it's kind of the same old suspects, but, you kind of got to tip your hat a little bit. You hope Dixon can kind of bounce back and just rebound, because they went up to they went up to the big boys' house, on Friday night in a mud bag,
right?
And they kind of got to took it to them. Let's just call it how it is. And when you're
happens to a lot of teams that go to Byron.
Well, and when you're kind of emerging into that scene, that arena for the first time, and you have a spread team, and you're kind of depending on throwing the ball, and then this happens, it can be a shock and awe. And I don't mean to use those terms lightly, with things that are going on in our crazy world and stuff like that. I'm not trying to joke around, but it can be very kind of eye-opening when that happens. So hopefully Dixon bounces back. And I know weather and the elements played a big part of that. Later on in the 50-yard line report, I like to talk about, a big game happening down here in the South. I'll talk about that later because we talk about it every year. And then I'll talk a little bit of history in terms of a town in the Midwest that has a very unique set of football teams. And then I'm going to throw something your way. I'm going to throw a little softball pitch your way and throw a name at a coach that I think there you go. Load up. Get that back elbow up. Get that back elbow up. There you go. And we'll talk about that. So I got a few things to throw at you in 4A a little bit later.
All right, let's talk about our friends over in 8-Man. Again, I want to thank NUICfootball.com for their 8-Man rankings every week, which we probably use. I know our friends NUIC have a playoff show that they do, and I know our friends from View from the West also have one. Go check them out for sure. But, your friends over here are going to be on the air as well, and we'd love to hear from you. And, again, we'll take your calls. We'll take your DMs. We're very, very listener-friendly and viewer-friendly that night for sure. Love to get your feedback. So, again, 8-Man top 10 according to NUICfootball.com for this week. Amboy at 1, Milledgeville at 2. St. Thomas More, our friends over in Champaign, are at number 3. Polo at 4. Ridgewood at 5. Martinsville at 6. Milford, Cisna Park at 7, South Fork at 8, South Beloit at 9, and FCW at 10. And of course, we will also be getting the 8-man playoff brackets. So we will definitely dig into those as well and give you some thoughts when we get those over the weekend. And looking forward, just like 8-man's looking forward, like everyone else, looking forward to playoff football next week.
Yeah. And I would just like to say this, Jason Kirby over there at West Central, started the season off with some losses, and then he kind of put together, 3 wins all of a sudden. And so now he's 3-4 and going against Milford. He ended up losing 34-18. But, it just shows you, They're coaching hard. Everybody's doing their thing. Ball is ball. I got a little bit of a report from Pat Elder at Ridgewood, so I'd just like to, send a shout out to him, my college roommate, and they're playing good football. The way it looks right now in 8-man, I mean, those top 4 teams that you talked about right there, I think it's Amboy and some of these other teams. I think STM is going to have a say. Milledgeville, a couple sleepers that you might want to watch out for. We'll talk about that later. I'll go to the 50-yard line report and tell you, but there's some good football. Yep. I will say this: Jim Morrow's struggling a little bit just with some injuries and stuff. They've kind of lost a few games in a row, and sometimes that can happen in 8-man football. But I'll talk a little bit more about that on the 50-yard line report with 8-man.
So I think one of the important things that we'll cover just a little bit, maybe a storyline or two to look forward to going into the playoff pairings. And again, your friend Steve Susi does just an absolutely terrific job over at Shaw Media. Does his playoff projections every week. I know I've got a couple guys on my free message board that do playoff projections. One of the overriding storylines after week 8, kind of the fallout, if you will, is quite a few small schools crashing their way into the tournament, which I think is awesome, because
Sure.
What I love when that happens, it re-educates everybody on playoff football and how it works.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you have 8A schools wanting to know, why is this school moving up and why is that school moving up? Well, you could blame Greenfield Northwest, you can blame Stark County, you can blame all these 1A schools that all of a sudden no one really expected them, and all of a sudden they get a big win, and next thing you know, they wind up in projections. So again, we saw that this week. Next week, after week 9, Matt, it could be the opposite. We can see some big enrollment schools crash and push everything back down in the final say. So we learned a couple of things over these many years. Number one, projections are wonderful, but they are not final. Just like polling results, at election night. You can't give you all the polling results up till that night. Once the election's on, all polls are off, and it comes down to what comes out. And then the other thing is, everyone needs to learn and everyone needs to remember is that anything can happen over the next 24, 48 hours. And we've seen weird stuff go down. And if you've looked at the forecast, maybe not quite as bad as it was last week, but it's not going to be great. There's still some calling for some rain, and you don't know what you can run into. And we see what kind of havoc that can cause sometimes. So I think we need to remember that. We need to remember anything can happen from an upset standpoint. And then the other thing is that it's really, to me, it's just great because it makes you have to care about everything.
Mm-hmm.
You have to care about getting a score from Southern Illinois. You have to care about getting a Chicago Public League final result, because that's going to impact all kinds of stuff. That's the beauty, the absolute beauty of IHSA playoff at this time of the year, in my opinion.
Yeah. I agree with you. I mean, and we'll just use the same old sayings that we say, from Rockford to Carbondale, from Quincy to Danville. Yep. This is a statewide tournament. There are 256 teams that earn that right to be in this. That's why it's special. And there's no knock on any other sport. I want to shout out to my daughter, who just was asked to be on the varsity volleyball team at Champaign Central, and they're playing their volleyball regionals at Central. It's going to be probably a showdown between Central and Centennial. My daughter has no clue. But my point is, in volleyball and basketball and some of these other sports, everybody gets involved. This is the only one where you have to earn that right. And I would like to just firsthand tell all the viewers that I apologize for really not being on top of my game and talking more about the 3 and 4s and the 2 and 4s and the 4 and 4s. I feel like I've failed a little bit now that you brought this up, because that is the greatness of this. We're going to have 5 and 4s that are going to win in week 10. Right. It's going to happen.
Yep.
And, and it's just really neat to see how this all unfolds, because let's face it, you have different parts of the state that have no idea what's going on in different parts of the state, and how it impacts every game has an impact, and it's just going to be really interesting to see how it all unfolds. Because I love looking at the list and see who kind of popped out and popped in, because I was there one time at Fisher. I mean, I would not have the claim to fame that I had because there was some years when I was 5-4, but we had great playoff points and we got in, and it was wonderful. And it's wonderful for all of these teams that get in and get a chance to be in the dance.
I'm already hearing from coaches saying, you know what, this non-conference game killed us, or that non-conference game killed us. We thought we were going to get 5-6 playoff points. We're getting no playoff points.
Yeah,
it's really a no nonsense system. And if your playoff points are low, you know exactly why they're low. It's right. Mm-hmm. It's literally in front of you in black and white. Yep. Why that happened. And then finally, before we move on, we'll get to your 50-yard line report. This has been a strange year, and definitely in the larger enrollments for sure. I can tell you, it's been a strange year. Meaning, there are a handful of what I would call real powers that are going to be, I don't want to call them prohibitive favorites, but favorites in certain classes. And then it's everybody else. And it's one of those years, Matt, where you're going to see a lot of everyone else's making early moves and making upsets. And people are going to scratch their head, and you're going to see a lot of familiar names that are going to fall. Yeah. It's going to happen a lot this year. So it's going to make it a real fun playoff, unless you're one of those favorites, and then it's going to be a head scratcher. But it's going to be wild. And I told our friend Mr. Susi, you think your projections were wild this week? Wait till week 9 going into the actual projections and see how crazy things could get. Things can get pretty crazy on Friday.
And I think too, I mean, I don't know about you. I mean, I think this is the first time in all the years that we've done this that this season has gone by this fast.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Like, I mean, seriously, like it's really.
I know.
And I don't know the reason why. I don't know if it's just.
I think we started a week earlier this year than we did the year before. So it seems like we got an earlier jump start on it. I know it really isn't, but it just kind of felt that way.
It just flew by. I don't know if it's because of the nice weather in the first game.
I think it was.
I think maybe you think back to it, the Mount Carmel, East St. Louis just kind of was like a catapult, and it just shot us right out of the cannon. And I think it just kept us going, Maybe one way to look at it. I don't know.
Yeah. No doubt. All right. So let's roll into your 50-yard line report. Where do you want to start?
Let's go 1A real quick.
Okay.
So I think what's kind of neat about 1A is we're going to talk about Cesar Valier. So Mike Rood is the head coach down there, and he used to be the head coach at Johnson City from 1990 to 2006. He had over 100 wins. He's a Hall of Fame coach. They're in the Black Diamond Conference, and so it's going to be really interesting to see what they do because they're getting ready to go for a perfect season down there. So I call them kind of the team that just kind of is out of the gate real quick, They had a big win over Johnson City. Cecil Valley is way down south. They co-op. So we'll see. Strength of schedule, I don't know. But I just want to kind of give a little bit of love to them. And Coach Rood, he's kind of like the Jim Boeheim of high school football. You think of Jim Boeheim, Syracuse basketball. I'm sorry, I'm doing basketball references. Boeheim always ran that zone defense. Mike Rood has always done like single wing stuff, but he's kind of molded some of that stuff, and he's just he's a football junkie. So in Class 1A, I think a team that you need to kind of watch out for in terms of a lurking team is Casey Westfield. We've talked about this in the past. Here's a team that's been in state championships. They're on the Little Illini. They had a Week 7 loss to Mount Carmel, 23-20. They have an enrollment of 230. Watch out for Casey Westfield. And then I guess I will make a comeback here, and I will talk about some of these 4-4 teams because we got 2 of them right now, and they're 2 popular names in the state of Illinois, the Tuscola Warriors and Stockton, okay? So Stockton's going to be at Galena. Tuscola is going to be at home against Oblong. Let's look at Stockton's resume. They lost 20-16 to Dupec in week 1. They put up 20 points against Lena Winslow and lost 48-20. They lost to Fulton 40-16. They lost to Forreston 22-8. Okay, they're coached by Sean Downey. Stockton has an incredible amount of just tradition. If they get a win, they pop in and they'll be 5-4, and that'll be another NUIC team that's in the playoffs. Tuscola, they lost some games earlier in the season, 3 out of 4. But now they're on a kind of a win streak here. But their 3 losses earlier in the season were to St. Bede, Farmington, and Shelbyville. So if Tuscola gets in at 5-4, again, that's a team that pops in, someone else pops out.
Yep, no doubt about it. I'll tell you from a 1A standpoint, I still look at Althoff and think, man, someone's going to run into that monster early, and it might not be good. It might not be good. You've got, I'm thinking one of the, maybe one of the higher seeds. I got to think probably down south. Camp Point Central is a 1. And they wind up a 4 or 5, and who knows, maybe even get plumped together in the same round or same side of the bracket.
Yeah.
Had a chance to watch a little bit of tape earlier in the week on Althoff, Matt. They're a monster. they're an absolute monster. So, again, never say never, but that's a team that could really change the makeup of the South.
No, absolutely. And like you said, one of those teams like Camp Point, or let's think of some other teams. I don't know, like Greenville.
Yeah.
They could kind of just, their season could come to an interesting kind of confrontation. Let's just put it that way.
But we've seen those bigger names before sometimes show up and not show up. So that's why I play the games, my friend.
Sure, absolutely.
2A.
I'm going to talk real quick about the teams out of the gate. I think this is going to be really interesting, guys. So the top 2 teams in 2A and 3A in terms of the playoff projection and what have you is the Lincoln Prairie Conference. So we have Arthur, Lovington, Atwood, Hammond against Sullivan. Okay, so this is for the championship. Both teams are 8-0, and that's going to be really interesting to see that game kind of unfold. Both teams have had great seasons. And for Sullivan, their main guy is their quarterback Cooper Christensen. They have a running back Ian Fryman, and a linebacker Mason Booker. I know for the keys to the game, Arthur Lovington, they got to control this quarterback. I mean, he has done it all for Sullivan. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that goes. Tip your hat off to both teams. It's going to be a dynamic, awesome atmosphere. When we get into a sleeper team, again, we got some heavyweights going at with one another. Okay. Carmi, White County, 7-1 in the Black Diamond Conference going against Johnson City. So, it's going to be really interesting. Kurt Simon has been there for a long years, 26 years he's been there, over 160 wins and 104 losses. But, he's done some great things down there at Carmi. It's going to be really interesting. Johnson City lost 32-30 earlier in the year to Cesar Valier. So it's going to be really interesting. This is way down south in the Black Diamond. Todd Thomas has been there for 6 years, and he has 40-16. So, and then my lurkers, you can maybe add to this a little bit there, Tim, but I think of some of the old traditional names: Deer Creek Mackinac, 4-4, Carthage, 4-4, Woodstock Marion. What's going to happen with these teams if they win? And we just talked about this. We're catching up 5-4 teams that kind of buy in, get in, and kind of have a unique way of kind of how they play football.
Yeah, those are definitely some games to watch, and again, it's interesting. I think in 2A, you look at how things shake out. I mean, you've got some heavy hitters, obviously, Maroa Forsyth being at the top of one side of the bracket or the other. They're going to be involved if they go north. Who do they run into there? And then the cut line's always a story as well. Is Bloomington Central Catholic going to stay 2? Is Wilmington going to move down from 3 down to 2? How's all that going to shake out enrollment wise? And that's going to have a huge setting on the field. I'm still incredibly intrigued by Seneca, and I know they're no sleeper at all.
Yeah.
But the way their season has gone, I mean, obviously their profile win is the first week or 2 against Wilmington, but they've been dominant, and this is the second year in a row now that they've kind of put it together. So I'm real intrigued by them, and again, as I mentioned, just seeing how all this shakes out and seeing what team kind of gets stuck in, whether it's, the field moves up, the field moves down. I think 2A is that field that kind of feel almost the most impact from all this. So it'll be interesting to see.
I'd like to just piggyback off that when you talked about Seneca, because we talked about this. We sporadically talk about Seneca, and I think they're a perfect example because it goes back to some of the things you've always said, like, what do you do when it's the same old teams, and I've tried to answer that. Like, I don't really have an answer. It's like tradition is tradition. And sometimes tradition is hard, and sometimes it's hard to get. And sometimes momentum and success is hard to get. Well, here's Seneca. They come onto the scene last year and kind of get punched in the mouth in the playoffs. Like, okay, welcome to the big boy world. But, I think they kind of took that taste in their mouth.
Yeah, learned from it.
They've used that. As fuel in their engine to keep them going. And like you said, if you're going to get Wilmington, get them early and then take advantage of that momentum. And I think they have.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, my friend, 3A.
3A, I'm going to get down in your old neck of the woods there. We're going to talk about the Southern Illinois River to River Conference. Okay.
There you go.
And we're going to talk about the Ohio version. And we have a DuQuoin team who is 8-0. Taking on Murfreesboro, who's 8-0. So just a little history lesson to all of our viewers out there. Football was established in DuQuoin in 1928, and you guys could probably care less about that because you want the right here and the right now. Well, Al Martin used to be the coach down there for 27 years. He won over 254 games, 4 seconds. 1992, he had a first place. And now they have a guy, Logan Spain, in his first year, he's 8-0. Okay. Murfreesboro, they had football established in 1914. Gary Carter's been there 12 years. He had that incredible run in 2019 where he had second place finish. He's 80-48. I think it's going to be a really, really neat, interesting game. Those are my guys that are kind of out of the gate. A couple teams that I kind of want to talk about, you can help me a little bit, but Poplar Grove, North Boone, here's a 6-2 team. They got to go at Dixon. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Dixon bounces back. They're 7-1 now. Senior night for Dixon. What's going to happen after they kind of got punched in the face there by Byron? And then I think your lurkers, again, I'm glad that we've talked about this, but here's these 4-4 teams. Oregon, 4-4. Oregon likes to run the ball. You got Monmouth Roseville, Jeremy Adolphson, 4-4. They're a good football team. And then my friend, Coley Welder, Monticello, 5-3. He had a big win against Prairie Central. Big win. And now he has senior night. I know it's going to be very, very, very emotional for him. His son, Trey Welter, is a receiver. They take on Scott Hamilton and Salona Unity.
I won bingo. Thank you.
There you go.
I look at the 3A field and I think I would be scared big time of some of these big names that can wind up being very low seeds.
Sure.
Examples? I don't know. How would you like to run into like Monticello?
Hey, ask Mount Carmel.
First round.
Mount Carmel, almost got beat last year 8-6.
Yeah. Stillman Valley. How would you like to run into them in the first round as a low, say a 12, a 13, a 14 seed, or Montini is like a 12.
Yeah.
That would just be.
This is what they live for. And I can
dangerous.
Guarantee you, and I'll brag about my buddy, Coley, because he's this math teacher and he's one of the best coaches in the state of Illinois. I mean, you just get the competitive juices flowing this time of the year. You prepare and you prep your teams, and you don't really care if you're 4-4, 5-3, 6-3, 5-4, whatever. You know that it is 0-0 when you go somewhere to play. It is as simple as that.
No doubt about it. All right, and then finally 4A.
4A, I'm going to need your help a little bit on this, but I just think we need to kind of talk about it. This is our first year out of the gate here. I'm going to talk about Rochester and Sacred Heart Griffith.
Yep.
This is the first year that we're doing this, and it's not a Leonard Bowl. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that kind of unfolds. We haven't talked about Rochester, but they're still kind of the team to beat.
Take them for granted.
A sleeper team that I want to talk about, and their football team was established in 1897, and that is the Kewanee Boilermakers.
There you go.
So Kewanee, Illinois, Tim, do you know what is famous about Kewanee, Illinois?
See, I'm not cheating. I could have went and done a Google search. I am not cheating. No. Why can I not remember this? Isn't
It
the
is the hog
Boilermaker?
capital. It is the hog capital of the world. And there's
There you
two
go.
high schools in that town. So you have Kewanee High School that has about 500, and then you have Weathersfield, and they both have interesting names. So Weathersfield has the Flying Geese. They now co-op with Anawan, and they're now the Titans. And you have two teams that are just incredibly competitive year in and year out. Kewanee has had more of a roller coaster ride. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that kind of works out. And then I want to talk a little bit more about Kewanee. I mean, it is the hog capital of the world, but they're in that Three Rivers Conference. And when you think of the Three Rivers Conference, you kind of think of, Taylor Ridge, and you think of Morrison, you think of all these other teams, you think of Princeton, Sterling Newman, Spring Valley Hall. Yep. And you just kind of forget about the Kewanees of the world, Interesting nickname. They're good. Matt Taylor replaces Brad Swanson. Brad Swanson left to go up to Harvard. So it's interesting. And then I'll talk about my lurkers. And I'm just going to give you that softball pitch right here. Let's talk about R.J. Haynes and Mantino and Coal City. Watch out for those two teams right there. And they're facing off on Friday night.
Yeah, Coal City's had a nice year. I mean, you lose a game to Wilmington and people just seem to forget about you. But they're still a very, very strong team. Gonna have definitely will have Francis Lawford on the playoff pairing show. Actually, all the WJO listening area head coaches. So we're gonna have roughly 14 head coaches on Saturday night and talk about their draw. Yeah, again, it's you've got monsters there. We mentioned IC Catholic Prep is down there. They're gonna wind up being a 6, a 7, and 8 seed around somewhere around that, depending on how they finish.
Yeah.
Phillips coming out of the city will be a solid team. They'll be probably a 14, 15 seed. So again, there's the monsters, the Rochesters of the world. There's no doubt they're going to be favorites and maybe make a run, but a couple of surprise ones. Someone's going to get upset, Matt, somewhere in this 4A field. You just don't know.
I think in 4A and 3A, I think you're going to have a Shaka Smart VCU team that's going to come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Because I always think about, and again, I just refer back to sports because it's useless sports knowledge I'm giving our fans right now, but I always think about the Bill Selfs of the world, losing to the Bradleys and the Bucknells and, VCU. And he would always say, it's always the matchup. It's always the matchup. It's not the number. It's the matchup.
Yep.
And I think we might see a lot of that. So the 50-yard line report, as it dips into 8-man, I just want to say it, and this is pretty quick. And this is nothing bad towards the 8-man because I just got some quick information. It's Amboy and probably everybody else. I think your sleeper teams are South Fork, they're just huge. I think Martinsville is a very quick, slippery team. Here's a school that has 115 kids. So God bless the football gods that said, hey, let's give this small school 8-man football. And they have it, and they're pretty darn good. And so I would also say your lurking teams are I really want to see how good STM is and how good Milford is and how good Polo is. Because now I don't know this for a fact, but I think I kind of do. And maybe you could help me here, Tim. But they're 1 through 16 seedings. I don't think they have a north-south. I think it's just 1 through 16. And it's like, that's
what it looked like to me.
It's going to be like FCS. You're going to have North Dakota up here and South Dakota State down here in your collision course. So you're going to have Amboy on one side and STM on the other.
Don't you almost have to do it that way?
Yeah.
Because otherwise they're going to have the same problem that we talk about.
Yes.
1A through 8A, where you're on the same damn teams, especially with a smaller pool to choose from.
Exactly. And so I don't want to get you in a bad mood because now
we're good.
No, but that'll shift to 1 to 32.
Yeah.
Because that's what we want to talk about.
That's
why you and I both like 8-man, because it has a Wild Wild West kind of true playoff appeal to it.
No, honestly, 1 through 32, look, everybody knows where we stand on it, know how I feel about it, know how you feel about it. Districts will set me off. That'll be the rocket launch. That'll get me going. because I don't want to talk about districts, and I have many, many reasons why, but that's for another show.
I'm sorry I elevated your blood pressure.
If it's not you, it's the family, it's someone. So might as well be talking football, having fun. If it's going to raise it, at least have a good time doing it. So that's about it. Again, we're a little bit under what we usually are, but that's okay. We're not paid by the hour, so it's
We'll save it for Saturday.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. We don't want to, and again, I don't want to give you too much stuff because again, a lot could change. A lot could change over the next 48 hours or so, and we'll see how things go. So again, Matt, anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
No, I think we did a good job of kind of talking about some of these teams that are going to kind of, like the Monticellos, the 4-4 teams. It's going to be really interesting. You got to think about too, like especially in 1A, it always seems like it's a team that's not even in the top 10 that kind of flexes its muscles and kind of comes up through the Channel Canal. It always happens. Could that be a Leroy? Could that be a Gibson City? Could that be a Hayworth? It's just going to be fun. It's going to be fun to watch how it all unfolds. And then, like you said, I think when you get into 3A and 4A, you might have some heavyweights that maybe stumble.
We'll
find out.
So I'm looking at advanced forecast. I think we're going to be a little bit better this weekend than we were last weekend. Because Friday's been changed, at least up in the northern part here. I'm just south of Joliet, so I don't know if you consider that. I'm south of 80, not by much.
Yeah.
If there was a war and it was on I-80, I would be in the middle of the battlefield probably. So.
Okay.
Friday during the day, you're talking partly mostly cloudy, windy, 10, 15 miles an hour, but no real precipitation in the forecast. A 15% chance on Friday night, but just cold, windy, 48 high. And then again, games on Saturday are generally have to be at 1 o'clock, no later than that for IHSA purposes.
Yeah.
No real mention of major precipitation. So I think we're going to be okay, which is good.
Well, we'll see. And it's going to be a nice Saturday, warm 60-degree day on Saturday here. So we'll have some good football, college football, and we just wait for the projections to come out.
Brackets are there. Join us on 1340 WJL, WJL.com, YouTube Live. Myself, Matt Leng, the WJL Sports crew, we will be there from 7:30 to about 10 o'clock or so. We'll break it down. We'll hear from Matt. We'll get his thoughts on 1A through 4A, and basically we'll handle 4A through 8A and any questions. Love to hear from you. You guys are always welcome on my radio show. We'll take your calls, take your DMs, whatever you got. Can handle it. So again, it's going to do it for Matt Leng. I'm EDGYTIM. Thanks everybody. Have a great night. Appreciate you watching, and we'll be back with you next week.